Hello and welcome back to Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat to some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry we're in of self-publishing and writing. And today we are thrilled to have a very, very special guest from a very, very special organization here to tell us about something that I think many aspiring authors out there might not be aware of or might not know how to do it. So let me welcome Oriana Leckert to the show, Head of Publishing at Kickstarter. Thank you so much for joining us, Oriana. How are you doing?
Roland, thank you so much for that very lovely intro. And Craig, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing very well.
Well, that is wonderful here. Thank you for joining us. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. Craig, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks, Roland, and thank you very much for coming on, Oriana. I think that this is a really exciting topic because a lot of authors just, they don't really think of Kickstarter as a place to go for, getting funding for the writing or the exposure or whatever. I think that the biggest thing that put Kickstarter in people's minds was, the recent Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter project that made $40 million, and let's be clear, I don't think that is the norm. So let's not all get excited and think, oh, we're about to get $40 million. But we'll talk about that too. But first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about, yourself and Kickstarter and how it can be used and how it is used by authors, in general, since you're the head of publishing. So I know that you are the one to give us all the real information, not just rumors and, anecdotes.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. So, yep, I'm Oriana. My background's about half and half traditional book publishing and digital media. I actually came to Kickstarter 4.5 years ago to grow our journalism category, which I did with some pretty cool successes for a couple of years. And then COVID happened and obviously set everything a twirl. Things went hither and yon. But now I'm the head of comics or head of publishing. So I've been for the last 2 years doing all of publishing, all of comics, a little bit of journalism when I have time. This new promotion, actually, I'm going to be focusing just on comics, just on publishing. Sorry, because I'm looking at some notes here. We're bringing on someone new to do the comic stuff. So I'm going to be all about authors all the time, which is really exciting. I've been through, my whole career has been in the publishing industry, kind of from all sides. I started out at Random House back before they had absorbed Penguin, even considered absorbing anyone else and getting sued about it for the Justice Department. I've been a matchmaker for ghostwriters, a fact checker for a book packaging company, a reader for a literary agent, really like all around the industry. And I've always worked on the creative side. So my whole kind of career has been supporting authors, helping them figure out how to make their work better. And Kickstarter, I get to help them figure out how to fund that work. There is so much thrilling stuff happening in the author space on Kickstarter. I've got some stats here to share. Since the company launched in 2009, almost $350 million have been pledged to publishing campaigns on the site. We've had 68,000 projects launched. We've got 3 million unique backers. Publishing has been relatively steady as the sort of like other creative categories have gone up and down over Kickstarter's lifetime. Publishing has been like a very strong backlist, really just, a strong, stable category all the time. And yet last year was our 5th best year ever in a row. We've seen really strong growth in genre fiction, sci-fi fantasy, and romance particularly. There's a really strong self-publishing contingent in nonfiction. We've got a lot of sort of like entrepreneurs and memoirists, folks of that nature, a lot of good children's books. Kickstarter has also always been a really proud home for marginalized voices, those that have been otherwise rejected by the sort of gatekeepers of the mainstream publishing industry. And we also see publishers on the platform. We've had indie presses forever, and we're starting to see campaigns where there's some work being done to kind of bridge that gap between traditional and self-publishing. A really nice example that just closed a few weeks ago Charles Sewell, New York Times best-selling author, who's got a new fantasy novel coming out from HarperCollins this summer. While he was writing that, he also decided he wanted to do a companion sort of art book full of maps and charts and posters and illustrations. He kickstarted the companion volume which sort of doubled as a pre-marketing campaign for the traditionally published book, so people will be getting their Kickstarter volumes when Harper is putting out the main volume, and they're really working together to sort of like augment one another and make an even bigger splash for his work. So tons of possibility here, so much creative stuff going on, which I hope I can get into a lot more of, but that's a bit of an overview.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot going on, and it's interesting to think about how people use it. The idea with Kickstarter, if people aren't familiar, is an author comes on or in general, I mean, I'll talk about it in terms of authors, I guess, but obviously it's for any kind of project. But an author would come on and they'd start this project. Is that what you call it? The Kickstarter project?
Like campaign or project.
Campaign, yeah. So they'd start a campaign about anything. So this companion book being one. Sanderson's he was going to write 4 books over the next year, right? And his Kickstarter was for all 4 of those. And often what they'll do is they'll explain the project, they'll explain what they want to do, what they need the funding for, and then people come on as backers, and they agree to fund for a certain amount of money. And then the interesting thing is that there are levels of backing, right? If you pledge a certain amount of money, you get sort of like the base project. But if you pledge just a little bit more, then there's like this extra thing you might get. And, the author, the person setting up the campaign, is the one who sets all those milestones. And, based on how much you give, you get all these extra things, right? So I think that is a really, really cool idea too. I know Sanderson had a whole bunch of them, but I think that's really a neat way for people to be able to give, to the level that they're comfortable, and still get the main thing that's being offered. But for people that can give more, there's that recognition that, they gave more, so they get, a little bit more as well.
Well, and it's a really excellent way for, to create a really direct line between authors and their readers. You get to sort of gather, this is a corny line that I wind up saying in like every time I do this, but everybody thinks about the funding side of crowdfunding, which is obviously very important, but equally important is the crowd. That's specifically what you're doing with this kind of fundraising mechanism, is you're assembling your crowd, your most fervent supporters, and you're offering them things, as you said, exactly, like your main tier would probably be various versions of your book, ebook, paperback, hardcover, maybe a deluxe edition, but there are tons of other rewards that you can offer, which will thrill and delight your most fervent fans, make them feel really close to the creative work that you're doing. You can often even like tap them for suggestions. We see a lot of people doing this, right to their mailing list before they launch the campaign, and say, what would you rather have? Scented candles based on a plot point in the book, or a Zoom launch party when my next volume comes out? Give the people what they're looking for. And all of these things are going to like make this sort of virtuous cycle between yourself and your readers even stronger.
So yeah. I was going to say, this is really the thing that makes Kickstarter so strong, is it's facilitating a way to help your core audience fund your project. So obviously it helps coming into it with a core audience, which is where like Brandon Sanderson did so well.
Yes, of course. As with anything, you have to, being on a platform like Kickstarter gives you access to a wide universe of readers who don't know that they're your fans yet. But yes, you will do well to start with your own sort of core community and let that build and build.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good point. So if you were to come on and not have, a lot of projects, they come on and somebody has some idea for an invention or something, and they want to see, part of the Kickstarter idea is to see if there are people out there that will pay for it, and those people will come on and be early backers, and they'll get some version of that product when it's done. And I imagine that, yeah, it's great if you have your own built-in audience, and clearly that, Sanderson did, and that's why he made so much money. But a lot of authors will be coming on without that. And so how does Kickstarter, promote that if the author, the project backer, or the project creator doesn't have their own audience?
Well, I don't suppose I would recommend launching a Kickstarter campaign if you have absolutely no audience whatsoever. But what you want to do. So a thing that we should establish in case folks don't know is that Kickstarter funding is all or nothing. So there are many crowdfunding platforms that have many different structures. On Kickstarter, if you say we're going to raise $10,000 and you only raise $4,000, you don't get any of that money. People tend to find this scary, but it was actually designed that way to protect the creators and the artists. Because, if you've done your homework, your budgets, you called the post office, you figured out how much it costs to produce a book and put it in a mailer and get it out to people. If in order to do all that, you need $10,000, if you only get 4,000, you're in a terrible spot. You don't have enough money to do the thing that you've now made a bunch of promises around. So one key thing when determining whether it's time for you to launch a Kickstarter campaign is doing a real honest assessment of who's in your audience and making sure that your ambition matches your reach. If you are an emerging writer, if you are still building your network, if you are just sort of getting to the point where you're starting to have a community of fans, probably you're not going to raise $42 million. Probably you're not going to raise $42,000. And so, you really need to be very clear-eyed about what's possible based on the work that you've done. And maybe now isn't the time for you to run a Kickstarter campaign. Maybe you want to do some more work with your audience building, with your, sort of like network enhancing before. Maybe you want to scale down the scope of your project, shift your vision, break it into pieces, run a few campaigns over the course of several years. But, making sure that what you're setting out to do is possible based on the work that you've already done. That's going to be really critical to making sure that you find success here.
Okay, so you do need some sort of audience to build on then. You don't want to come in completely cold. So I guess for an author, if you were to if you were considering doing a Kickstarter then, if you have that audience already, so what kind of things would you be looking for to do? But let's think of in terms of a self-publishing author where, they don't have as many upfront costs. There are some, creating covers and, getting it edited and all that. But then, some of those people that have written books already might have that budget. But if they're creating a Kickstarter, usually it's because they want to do something even greater, right? So what are the kinds of things that those self-publishers have used the platform for successfully?
Oh, you're asking me about different kinds of campaigns? Yeah, I mean, you can really do kind of anything here. It is definitely a great proving ground if you are wanting to do something stranger, more ambitious, slightly different than the kinds of stuff you normally write. This can be a great way to make sure that there's an audience for what you're doing. We see really everything, in the literary world, all kinds of books and magazines and podcasts and, zines. We see tarot decks. We see literary games. We see literary swag. So people have done like scarves printed with poems and like beautiful like art prints with quotes, all kinds of books. All, from like little like small things to like people who are writing series will run, campaign after campaign for each new volume. There's sort of the sky's the limit. And, a lot of what we're seeing with the sort of like, especially in the genre work, is people doing deluxe editions or, sprayed edges, ribbon bookmarks, fancy paper, elaborate sort of bindings that wouldn't really work with a traditional P&L, but really fit the vision, how someone has always wanted their book to look on a shelf. And there's a huge appetite for sort of like higher end books as kind of art object. I mean, there's really different psychology for somebody who's backing a book on Kickstarter versus someone who's going online to find the cheapest copy possible. You can really like give people a lot of bells and whistles and make, the most beautiful book you can think of.
That's
I
so
often
interesting.
think of those. Yeah, well, I often think of those bells and whistles as sort of the different levels of the backing. But I guess if you're doing something like that, that could be the project itself. You want to create this massive illustrated version of your fantasy novel, graphic novel, or something like that, and then maybe the different tiers are a signed version of it or a hardcover version of it, or the sky's the limit, like you said.
The sky's the limit, absolutely.
I find it so interesting because you obviously come from a traditional publishing background, and one of the, I guess the challenge that traditional publishers always have is they have to make the investment before they actually like see if they get any profit. And I know there's Dorless Kindersley. Dorless, I can't, you say their name right.
Oh,
Dorless
Dorleen Kindersley. I know who you're talking about.
They do these beautiful full color picture books and stuff. And I remember they printed like something ridiculous, like 500,000 copies of the Star Wars beautiful book, and they sold hardly anything, and it nearly put them out of business. So I guess with Kickstarter, it's like you come up with a special idea, like special covers, special photographs or something, and then you get your project kind of like funded before you do it, which I think...
This is exactly my pitch to traditional publishers who, as I said, are also on the platform a lot. It turns the traditional P&L on its head. Why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you know upfront how many dollars you have, how many copies you need to print, you know, what the interest is? I mean, a really good Rough Trade Books in the UK, they did a Kickstarter campaign, I think it was last year already, it's a little odd to even call it a book, but it's a book about The Shining. And so it doesn't come bound. It's a box of typewritten pages on a typewriter. The box itself is inset with the same pattern as the wallpaper from the hotel in the movie. It comes with a key fob from the room, all sorts of like strange essays. Shelley Duvall wrote an essay, like all of this stuff. Yeah, it's a very ambitious and elaborate project. And Ray, can you imagine if the editors went to their managing ed teams, their production team, and said, here's all the money that I need to make this wild book object. I'm sure that we'll sell enough copies to make that worth it, right? What a terrible risk. Why not run the campaign first, get your money, get your commitments, find out how big your audience size is, set an appropriate print run. Yeah, to me, it certainly seems like the smarter way to do it.
And people never know what people are going to be into. It's so there's
totally.
This age, the age of crowdfunding and stuff like that, it means there are projects that have been created that you'd think, yeah, if you went to a traditional publisher, would never have even looked at, would have laughed you out of the room.
I mean, honestly, even the Brandon Sanderson project, which like I'm happy to talk about it, but you know, since it is in a class of its own to such a degree, but there are actually like lots of lessons to be learned from what he did, and to clarify the scope of that project, it was called A Year of Sanderson. And what he did was backers will receive a box from him every month of 2023. 4 of those boxes include a new book that has never before been published. The others include collections of swag that are themed after various of the worlds and the characters that he writes about. And so all of this stuff is like, again, like way weirder and more elaborate and more difficult than just like a publisher sending people books. And to be clear, Tor will be releasing these 4 books in the future as paperbacks, but only through the Kickstarter can you get these sort of like hardcover, higher end, beautiful editions. And again, all of this like weird swag and additional merch.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to clarify. And I'm hoping most people aren't going in thinking that that's, what they're going to end up with. But it is worth talking about. I mean, so Sanderson went on, he created this world. Sanderson, his initial ask was he was looking for $1 million. So I guess he had, projected out what it would cost to do all these different things. He came up to $1 million, and he ended up with $41 million or whatever it was. So that's obviously much bigger, and he has this huge audience already. So we're not going to expect that. But I am curious about whether or not this was like. I'm curious whether or not he reached out to you guys and you guys worked with him, or this was just something where he came on and created a project like anybody else, and then all of a sudden you guys were taken by surprise as everybody else. And you're like,
no. We worked with that. I didn't work with Brandon personally, but I worked with his team. This was actually his second campaign. We worked with him on his previous. He only raised, I think, $7 million with the last one. So potatoes relatively. But no, yeah, of course, we worked with his team. I mean, thank goodness, because this project is so out of step. It is more than double the previous highest funded Kickstarter campaign ever. Not the highest funded publishing campaign, Kickstarter on the whole site. So yes, it's a good thing that I was able to alert our engineers and like let everybody know not to let the site, collapse under the weight of his incredible audience.
Wow, I didn't realize that it was the biggest ever. That's great, especially for a published
Yay, books.
book,
We
right?
never had a book in even the top 10 highest funded Kickstarter campaigns before.
Wow, that's awesome. So, he ends up having to do all these things, and this is true for any project, right? So you make these commitments. How does Kickstarter, manage the accountability of the person that did the project, the author in this case, meeting all those obligations that they made to their backers?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not on the trust and safety team. You should always check like sort of our rules and our regulations, but Kickstarter is not a store. We are not actually claiming accountability or responsibility, in fact, for what, we are creating a forum by which a creator says to the backers, you got to trust me. If you give me your money, I promise that I'm going to make you these things. And if they don't, that's really between the creators and the backers. This is not really something we see much delinquency about in publishing and comics. Other categories, and we do in the sort of like gadgety type categories where there's like these sort of like vast international manufacturing processes. We have a lot stricter requirements about renderings. And, again, I don't work on those teams, so I'm not sure. But it is very, very rare that we see a publishing or comic campaign not fulfill, largely because, these are folks you're trading on your reputation. You are asking people who you have an audience that you've cultivated to, follow you on this journey, to give you their money, to trust you, to like really, produce these things. And if you aren't going to do that, you're losing face and trust and, the reliability of like all of these people. So, and also, relatively speaking, the barrier to entry to like produce and manufacture books is not that high. So, once someone has got to the point where they're bothering to run a Kickstarter campaign about it, they probably have already figured out how to make a book.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking more about all that other stuff that they sometimes do that they might run into problems with or delivery on.
Oh, yeah, look, one of my biggest pieces of advice is, do not ruin your life. Don't make sure that you absolutely understand the fullness of production, shipping, and fulfillment for those enamel pins and the tote bags and the t-shirts. And, we tend to recommend rewards that are much less swag heavy for that reason. T-shirts that's not one item. That's multiple items at multiple sizes. And you don't know until after the campaign closes how many of each you're going to need. Those mugs are going to break in the mail. If you use enamel pins, you try to put them in your envelopes, you can no longer ship media rate in the US. There's a lot of complications to all of this stuff. So absolutely think very hard and work through everything that it means to make any promise you're going to make through your campaign.
Which, I mean, that's part of it anyway, though, isn't it? It's like it's very easy to not have these responsibilities when you're just starting out and publishing on Amazon. But I think when you get to the level where you think, okay, I can maybe do a Kickstarter, hopefully you've got these things already done.
Yep, hopefully.
Yeah, and I imagine that there is sort of some best practices and guidelines and such on Kickstarter that help guide people through that,
Totally.
That setup thing where, they go to set up a campaign and they start picking their, detailing everything out, and they can probably read some documentation and some various things.
We've got I maintain a creator tips page for publishers, kickstarter.com/creators/publishing. I've got articles about creating a budget, writing a press release, spreading the word, a guide to each element of your project page. There's tons of resources to help make sure that we are not letting you ruin your life with your ambitions.
Absolutely. I think, obviously that's good advice, but I think I can see the idea of people getting carried away and, saying, oh, I can do this and I can do that. And it's like, yeah, you do want to think about, and those are good points. Even the little ones you gave, like I wouldn't even thought about that. Oh yeah, t-shirt seems like an easy thing and it's not going to break when you send it, but you're right. Sizes, I didn't realize that everybody loved my book is small and I ordered, large.
Exactly.
That's wow. So what is the are there any like requirements, like when you go to sign up? If let's say a new author comes on, goes on the site, wants to start a campaign, what do they have to do? Is it just fill out the form?
Oh yeah, it's all, anyone can run a Kickstarter campaign. You don't have to know me or hear about this podcast. Very an open platform that anybody can use. You build your project in the back end, you upload your video, your images, you tell your story, you set up all your reward tiers. There's some approval stuff based on, you have to have a verified ID, you have to have a bank account that can be confirmed by Stripe, which is our payment processor. Got to make sure that nobody's using the site for nefarious ends. But yeah, anybody can do it. Anybody can run one when and how and however they want to.
So have there been any? Oh, go ahead, Greg.
Go ahead. Okay, well, I was just a quick question was, how long does a campaign usually go for? Like, in terms of both in terms of how long is the funding period, and then how long is a typical, if there is a typical sort of delivery window. I know with Sanderson it was a year of Sanderson, but I imagine most of the time it's not a whole year of stuff, right? So
most campaigns we recommend running it for about 30 days or about 4 weeks. The vast majority of your campaign action is going to happen the first and the last week, but you kind of want that time in the middle to sort of make, any activation that you're going to do. You want to give enough time for someone to write about it, people to put it on their blogs and their TikToks and tweet about, all of that. The fulfillment timeline can really be, again, like this is a contract between the author and their readers. So there are people who will run a campaign and say, look, the book is written, edited, typeset, designed. I just have to push this button to send it to the printer, and I need to give them a check. So that's what this money is going to. And, as soon as we get it, we're going to get the books. We're going to start sending them out. You'll have your books in, 6 months or less. Plenty of other authors will say, I'm at the very early stages, or here's my plan for this whole series. So long as you set the expectations with your campaign. And if your backers say, yeah, cool, here's my $50, happy to wait 3 years until you've got this book in my hand, no problem. It's really whatever your audience will bear. Do keep in mind, however, that if you want to make Kickstarter a bigger part of your entire publishing practice, you cannot launch a new campaign until you have fulfilled your old one. So do keep that in mind when you're working out your timelines.
So, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And then
yeah.
So what projects have you worked on, depending on how much information you can tell us, obviously, that have really excited you, or you've been really interested or surprised by?
At this point, I've worked on probably thousands of projects. There are like about 150 or 200 campaigns launching in my categories every week. I'm certainly not working with all of them. But yeah, this romance was my big initiative for last year, and I have been just really overjoyed seeing the like unbridled creativity and sort of like DIY tenacity of folks in the romance space. Also the sci-fi folks, it's similar. These are folks who I think have like underpinned the entire traditional publishing industry while long being denigrated by that very industry and like not taken seriously. So it's folks who know how to cultivate their audience, who know how to come up with like weird and wild ideas and execute on them with like nobody else helping them out. It's been incredibly fun. I love to see a bookstore campaign. I worked at a bookstore, back when I was a tiny baby New Yorker. It's like one of my favorite things to see. I love the diversity on this platform. There are children's books, so many children's books about, languages that are becoming extinct, or like really focused on like certain cultural celebrations, or like individual food items all told, in like multiple languages. And I love to see that. I love to see anyone who's just sort of like, you can tell when you look whether someone is doing it for like entrepreneurial reasons, which is awesome, versus the ones who are like, this has been the dream in my tiny squishy little heart since I was a child. Like, I'm so happy to see those people find their niche, find their crowd, create these like beautiful, wonderful, weird books that like the world is richer for. So I don't know. I get corny. I find this job like endlessly inspiring. Like even books that I'm like, I don't think I would ever read that. I get so excited just like seeing how hard people are working to like find the people who will get it out into the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you mentioned, I mean, I've seen Kickstarter and I've supported some Kickstarter things. How difficult, if you're an author and you've got an idea or maybe you've got an audience, how difficult is it to come up with a Kickstarter campaign, like creating a video and stuff like that?
Yeah, no, making a campaign is not the hard part. It's very easy. It's a very user-friendly site. I mean, Kickstarter is a campaign that's designed for storytelling, right? So you can really, your campaign can be as short or as long as you want it to be. I mean, number one piece of advice for anyone even considering running a campaign, go to the site right now, find 5 campaigns that you think are even moderately cool and back them, even just for $1 or $2, and then find and follow those creators on your preferred social platform of choice and just watch. Just steal all the best ideas that people are doing. You can do a tremendous amount of research just by digging around on the site. You can see how people talk about their projects, what sort of imagery they're using, what sorts of rewards they have, not just what rewards they're offering, but you can see on any campaign how many people are backing at any different reward tier. You can look at timeframes, you can look at budgets, you know, like all the information is there, and you can sort the site in a number of different ways. You can only look at memoirs, you can only look at children's books, whatever your niche is, see what other people are doing and use all the best tactics. Your question was originally, how easy is it? You know, the time to literally like upload things and write things and put them on the site is not long. The conceptual work of thinking about what rewards you're offering, how you're describing, what your elevator pitch is, you know, what your timelines and budgets and deliverables look like. And then of course, what is the work of running the campaign? Who are you telling about it? How are you talking to them? What levers and avenues of promotion and signal boosting, you know, are available to you, and how can you pull them? That is all the work that needs, you know, you need to do before you launch to ensure that you're as likely as possible to achieve success.
And I mean, if you're writing, then you're probably like creating something that's got a major time frame, major investment, and stuff like that. So this is probably all the stuff you need to do for Kickstarter is probably much less involved than whatever it is trying to kickstart.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean the ideas that people come up with are, you know, super creative. I mean, I was just looking as you were saying that on the site, and I see that the featured project on the publishing site is about a Nancy Drew retro style action figure. I mean, it's awesome, and it shows, you know, the little Nancy Drew.
And there's a new short story never before published
with a novella
comes along with it. There's like multiple of that doll in like different outfits based on specific book covers. Oh my god, those Wandering Planet guys are incredible. They're so cool.
And I mean, you would need a recognizable, you know, sort of character. Obviously somebody with a series that has a few hundred or few thousand readers might not be able to have a Kickstarter that has that where they can produce action figures from their character, but that's a great idea.
I mean, their last campaign actually was The Prisoner, which is like a television show from the 70s that I never even heard of.
I love that show.
I'm older. Yeah, you're too young.
You know, you just, I mean, what I feel like there's all this talk these days about how, you know, we're in this, instead of, I feel like social media 101, the goal was just like volume. You needed the biggest audience possible, where now there's terms for it. I can't think exactly, but it's like zealots. Like you're much better off having like 1,000 people who really, really care about your obscure television show or the romance novels or the language you're writing about a children's book, rather than 100,000 casual Twitter followers who are going to convert to backers at like a teeny tiny rate. Not just for Kickstarter, just for like, you know, finding even a small niche audience. If they're really passionate and you know how to deliver what they're looking for, that's like way stronger for you than just like a massive audience of casual fans.
And I think that's one of the things about the change in traditional publishing. You had gatekeepers who were like, we'll publish these books because they're good enough quality, which means there was a limit to the number of books that got published, a limit to consumers' choices. And that's why you used to have like these million sellers or something. And now instead of like 100 authors selling 1 million books each, you've got 1 million authors selling 100 books each. And that just seems, and getting more money from it.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah. And I love you know, what you were saying earlier about, because we've talked about this before too, where, you know, one of the reasons why traditional publishing, you know, one of the things that people didn't like about it, and why self-publishing in a lot of ways, in a lot of cases, is more successful than expected, was they never wanted to take those risks, right? An author would come up with some idea for something new, and that is not something that traditional publishers would want to do, right? That's not how they know they're going to make money, and they need to know they're going to make money, right? Whereas now,
and this is exactly why, I was saying earlier that we're such a proud home for marginalized voices. Like on the comic side, Kwanzaa Ofayemo is the example I always give. He went to so many comic book publishers and said, I want to write about Black superheroes. And they went, no. Nobody wants to read about Black superheroes. And he said, I'm pretty sure some people do. And he came to Kickstarter and his campaign went very viral. This was 5 or 6 years ago. He raised way more money than he would have gotten from a traditional comic book publisher giving him in advance. We see this with queer comics and books. We see it with like disabled writers, as I said, of like many, many languages that are not English. Yes, of course the audience is there, but the author can do a much better job of finding it than what has long been a fairly monolithic publishing workforce, of like largely white women who are able-bodied and straight and really don't know how to edit, how to market, how to promote these different kinds of voices.
That's so interesting. You're right. It's I was speaking. There's a genre in romance which is BWWM, which is Black Woman with White Man. And there are some fantastic authors. Jamila Jasper is one, and she writes beautiful books, and you read them, and her languages and writing is wonderful, and it's so evocative. And this is a genre of books that is now massively successful, sells tens of thousands of copies. That 20 years ago, publishers were like, "Oh no, nobody's going to read those.
Nobody
books.
wants to read.
We're not going to publish them." And they had these preconceptions, and it's just reality has proven that if you understand the niche, and it can be massively successful, and it gives underrepresented authors, people who never would have got past the gatekeepers, because as you said, publishing is like, I think 84% of people who work in traditional publishing are white women. Yeah. And so it gives this opportunity.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think too, like, even if your audience is smaller, right? And so then, you understand that, I guess the reason why the traditional publishers wouldn't want to take a chance. They know that the market's there, but it's too small for them because they can't make the money, because they need the volume. They need to have all the, where you can go on to something like Kickstarter and charge more, knowing that you might have a smaller audience, but since they're so underserved, they're going to be willing to pay a premium to get something that finally serves them. Yeah. And can allow you then to make a living, or to make a profit off of that, where you wouldn't have been able to if you just wrote a book and threw it on Amazon or something and only got $2.99 and then whatever, right? Okay. So this really gives so many new opportunities to people, not just the creators, but to the audience
too. Absolutely.
All of a sudden get access to things that they never would have got before.
And it allows that connection with the author, because I've been thinking very hard about it. It's like, what was the last book you bought, Oriana?
What was the last book I bought? I don't know how to pronounce her last name. The book is called Olga Dies Dreaming by the author's name starts with an X, and I am a well-meaning white woman and won't try to say it.
Well, why did you buy that book?
Because a friend recommended it to me, because a friend told me that she had read it and it was fantastic. She and I had been talking about how all we want to read anymore is books about women in their 30s and 40s living in Brooklyn without children, because that is our experience. And this was a book that fit perfectly into that demographic. It's
wonderful. I mean, it's amazing to me. There are so many different reasons why people buy books that traditional publishing was kind of almost like blind or ignorant to.
Totally.
And yeah. So
I was just seeing, I've only put like the teeniest tip of my toe into book talk. I know that TikTok is like a place I ought to be, but I was reading a tweet thread about a viral TikToker who reviews romance novels while eating really spicy food, to like talk about because romance novels are often ranked by the spiciness of the like sex scenes. So she sort of combines the two kinds of spiciness, and has gotten very popular, and of course is helping to sell a bunch of books. We all saw what happened with Bigelow Stickless, and this like 5-year-old Hugo winning book that like all of a sudden I just saw this morning that author just got like like a 4-book deal from her publisher after the like completely unexpected virality of like one tweet. Man, what a world we live in right now.
Yeah,
It's
that
exciting.
that spicy thing reminds me of that hot wings or hot shot. I don't know. There's that YouTube video where they interview big stars, and while they're in between each question, they're eating hot wings, successfully
And
hotter,
weeping.
spicier hot wings. Yeah, they're crying, and then they have that glass of milk there if you're a wimp and you have to drink it. And it's like, the really tough ones never want to drink the milk.
Right.
Yeah, that's fun.
Thanks for letting me come on your podcast without eating really spicy food.
Yeah, that's, maybe that's something we should have done. So when I was looking at the page, for that, and that Nancy Drew thing, popped up, it says it's the feature project. So how does a book, or how does a project become featured? Is that based on, sales and popularity, or is it something else?
Yeah, so a lot of our site operates algorithmically, and our algorithm, it's always easy to tell when an author has come from like the KDP world, because rather than the title of their book, their project will be called like, reverse harem romance novel with participants who like live on Mars, like all of these like keyword.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way to game the Amazon algorithm. Ours is not like that. Our algorithm really only works on popularity. So if a lot of people are clicking on your project, we assume a lot more people would probably like to see it. So having a good, strong campaign is going to help you have a good, strong campaign. And therefore, you should really make your campaign very clear and easy to like, from a search result, from a social post, for someone to know exactly what it is and why they would want it. So a lot of this, and our site is also, the algorithms are all dynamic and personalized based on your user history on the site, what you've backed, what you've clicked on, etc. So if I back book campaigns, all of my recommended carousels and macros are all going to be other books. So that's the algorithm stuff. The stuff like projects of the day, the things that go into like the Kickstarter newsletters, our own social posts, that's all done by people. We have a brand team. The whole company, in fact, is like always on the lookout for projects that we think represent the best of Kickstarter, and we're going to elevate them and try to show them to more and more people, because that's what we think is, our company is only as strong as the incredibly brilliant individuals who are putting projects up on it.
Yeah, for sure. I think, there's all these different opportunities, and you have all the, on the webpage too, I see, you can explore it by the different genres as well. And you can explore it by different types like radio and podcasts and, poetry and anthologies, but then also, the genres and stuff. So there is, even though, as you said, you want to come in with your own sort of audience, there definitely are ways to to bring people in that are already just on the Kickstarter platform and interested in your project. There are ways of discoverability besides you bringing them in. Yeah,
that's the big, Kickstarter is the sort of longest running. We're the only crowdfunding platform that's specifically designed for creative work. And yeah, there's a huge community here. And we get to, so if you run a project, there's a little chart in your dashboard that shows you what % of your backers are coming through your efforts and which are coming through Kickstarter's efforts, just through like platform presence. This can vary category by category, but in publishing, I would say somewhere between like 20 and 40% of your audience will come just from being on the platform. Again, that doesn't mean, you can come here, launch a campaign, and then do no work to promote it and just hope to be showered by magical internet money. I do not recommend that strategy. But you will there are huge advantages in, dollars to being on a site where lots and lots and lots of people are also both writing and reading books to be crowdfunded.
It's fascinating. Now, unfortunately, we are running out of time. This is it's been so fascinating speaking to you. We could probably go on forever, but unfortunately we have a time limit. So thank you so much for joining us, Oriana. Before we wrap up, do you have any extra questions or any end of thoughts, Craig?
Not really. I mean, I think we covered the basics, but I mean, I should even put that question back to Oriana. Is there anything that we didn't really touch on or didn't ask you that you think is important that, our audience would hear about?
I think this was really excellent. You asked smart and good questions. I would say, as I said before, if you're interested in campaigns, back campaigns, support other authors, join communities wherever you can find them. There are tons of Facebook groups for authors. There are like Twitter lives that, you know, until enough wires get gnawed through at that company that the whole site goes dark. There are lots of, we have a Kickstarter Reads Twitter account that's at Kickstarter Read, READ. We promote do projects of the day every day. We share press. I can also, I've got a weird name and I'm extremely online. You can definitely find me. My Twitter and Instagram are at Oriana BKLYN for Brooklyn. If you have specific questions we haven't covered here. But yeah, you know, find other people who are doing this, see what they're doing, learn from them, meet them, create community. You know, Kickstarter's foundational philosophy is a rising tide lifting all the boats. So figure out where your boat goes and how you can both be lifted and lift others, and you're going to do really well.
Well, that sounds like fantastic advice. And so if anybody is an aspiring author with a following, they think they want to learn more, where can they go?
Yeah, go to Kickstarter. The publishing creator tips page, as I said, is kickstarter.com/creators/publishing. Tons and tons of resources there. Find us and follow us on Kickstarter Reads. Find and follow your authors who you like, who are doing it. Find me. Yeah, it's all very accessible.
That is wonderful. We'll stick a link down below in a comment section. And if you are listening to this or watching on YouTube and you've liked what Oriana had to say, and you had a comment that you wanted to make sure you drop it down below. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that bell icon for to make sure you see notifications for every episode we have up. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Fully Booked. Thank you so much for joining us.